Alright guys, so I want to do a video today on the tactical idea of forcing moves. So if a chess game is like a boxing match, right, tactics are the punches and blocks, okay? Now, you don't win a boxing match necessarily just with punches and blocks, but you have to beat your opponent, but you do it with punches, right? If you get the difference. So the tactics are how you interact, move by move by move, right? You're either attacking, you're defending, you're doing both at the same time. And forcing moves are very, very important in tactics. So forcing moves means that you do something to threaten your opponent and they have to respond. Okay. It's also, forcing moves are also key to puzzles. So if you do a lot of puzzles, and I really do advise that you practice puzzles every day with chess if you can. Puzzles very often depend on forcing moves. So, and you have to see, like, okay, if I do that, that king's going to have to go to that square, then I can do this. Okay, so when there's only one, when you only leave your opponent one viable option, okay, forcing moves. So what I want to do, I'm going to go through two games that I've played this morning. I've seemed to have put my losing streak from the last few days behind me, and I've been kicking some ass today. So two games, one I play with the black pieces, one I play with the white pieces, and we're going to look out as we go through, move fairly quickly, look out for forcing moves. Okay, so the first game, my opponent's rated 1400, and he starts with e4, and I play e6, the French defense. Now, knight develops, okay, and I play c5. So this is going to allow my knight to come out here behind my pawn. That's typical. And now d4. Okay, now I think this is already inaccurate because it allows me to capture inwards with a wing pawn capturing a center pawn. So I simply take, and he's pretty much compelled to recapture, okay? And so there he goes. Now, knight to c6. Again, asking the question to my opponent, what are you going to do with your knight? He could actually leave it there, it is defended, and that is an option. So he certainly could think about developing, maybe even bishops out, lots of ideas. He actually captures, and that allows me again to capture with a pawn inwards towards the center. So now, look, I have 1, 2 center pawns, he's only got one. He develops another knight, okay? So if you notice as well, this knight has moved once, twice, 3 times, and then poof, it's gone in a puff of smoke, okay, and it's taken all that development with it. So basically, in real terms, he's moved 1 pawn and I've moved 2, okay, but he's lost his d pawn and I've lost my b pawn effectively because I've had 2 pawns capture inwards, okay. So the other knight comes out and now d5. So I'm striking for the center pretty quickly, right? He absolutely shouldn't capture with his pawn here. Because that would mean that he has no central pawns after I recapture with my c-pawn, and then I'd have 2. Okay, so he pushes. Now bishop out to here. This isn't strictly a forcing move, but it's a containing move. Okay, so I've pinned the knight against the king. This knight now cannot legally move. So he does this, and he's done this in response to what I did. So I have the initiative in the game. Okay, and now knight to e7. And now he tries to kick my bishop away because he wants to resolve this issue, this tension that's on the board there. I'm having none of it. I just slide my bishop back, saying, come on then, if you want to play b4, do it. Yeah, I can come down here and now threaten this pawn. So he plays b4. I come down to c7 and threaten that pawn. And now he plays the unusual knight to a4. So I'm guessing he's wanting to come into this square. And I had to think for a little bit and thought, am I concerned about the knight coming into that square? And I thought, I don't think you can do too much damage there. It is an outpost because there's no b pawn, and the d pawn is already too far forward to move the knight. So I grab the pawn, it's free material, and now rook c1, okay. I play bishop to d7, so ideas maybe at some point of a discovery on the knight, but of course if I play that now I'll just grab the pawn. Now the knight does come into c5, and I castle. So I'm quite comfortable with my position right now. He's moved his knights an awful lot, okay, which is the reason why he's only got 2 pieces out in the board compared to I've got 3 pieces out on the board and I've castled. So I'm practically finished with development. So how do we continue? Bishop comes out to g5. This pins this knight against the queen. So now I just drop my dark squared bishop back here. I mean, it's undefended where it is. It's also undefended there. So maybe the idea is, yeah, I think this knight is kind of irritating. So I want to get rid of it. If I can eliminate the knight, if he recaptures with the pawn, he's going to have doubled isolated pawns on the c file, and he's going to have an isolated and unprotected pawn on the a file. He doesn't want that, so he comes and attacks my queen, right? Forcing move. He's attacking a piece of high value with a piece of lower value. Bishop comes back to defend the knight. Now, there is a possible tactic here. I could also play bishop c8 at any point, threatening to win the knight, and bishop recaptures, I win the bishop too, so that would kind of drive the knight away, but then I would win the bishop, you see. So it's a tricky situation. In the game, I play rook to b8, so I'm quite happy to swap off a rook for a knight and a bishop. That's generally quite favourable. And now c4, so he might be threatening this, but I've got a c pawn that can recapture, maintain. I kick his bishop, forcing move, right? He's got to do something about that. So what he does is he decides to counter-attack, okay? Now, counter-attacks can be awesome, but a lot of the time they can go wrong as well. In this case, I now see I can play bishop f4, right? Very forcing. I'm attacking 2 pieces. This is a fork with the bishop, okay? So this bishop's now attacked twice, but also the rook is attacked, okay? So this is the key. If you play a counterattack, so you're going to leave your piece on prise, right, under attack, okay, where it could be captured. You want to counterattack another piece. That piece that you're counterattacking obviously has to be of equal or higher value. However, you need to be careful that the piece that you're attacking can't move with a threat of its own. And this is a serious threat, okay? So if white does nothing, I capture the rook, queen recaptures, pawn takes bishop, and I'm up a whole rook. So this is forced. He pretty much has to capture with his bishop. Now queen captures, okay? So now I've improved my queen's out in the board and ready to cause more trouble. This is a terrible move, I think, because it allows queen e4, right? The most forcing moves there are in chess are checks. The thing about checks is that when you're in check, you cannot legally do anything that doesn't get you out of check. You must get out of check on the next turn. That's why it's forcing. It's legally forcing in according to the rules of the game. The next is checkmate threats. Okay, and you think, well, surely a checkmate threat is more forcing than a check, but actually, a checkmate threat you can miss. In fact, both players can sometimes miss it. Okay, so now, so this is a check, so it's ultimate forcing move, and it's also a fork on the rook. So this move here by white, that's just a bad attack. That is not well thought through at all. Because what's the queen threatening there? Not threatening the rook, not threatening this pawn, not threatening this pawn. It's absolutely fine. This is completely pointless. And from a 1400 rated player, okay, and a 1400 rated player with 27 minutes still on the clock, by the way, okay. So queen blocks. I mean, the rook is lost anyway, okay. So I think actually, you know, king here and takes, the king would be forced back to there. So not a nice situation at all. Anyway, so I'll grab the rook with check, forcing move. King moves, and I come back here. Okay, so what I'm doing now, this is pretty forcing. So I'm offering a trade of queens. Now I'm up a full rook and a pawn at this point. Black's position is very unpleasant. Okay, should white accept the trade of queens? Absolutely should not when you're down in material. Okay, at this point, its operation cause as much trouble as possible, but I do keep saying to myself, I have to avoid these light squares because of this evil bishop. Some people forget that bishops can move backwards sometimes. Okay, so another exchange of queens. I'm keeping the pressure on. My opponent mustn't have time even to think about his own ideas. Right? I want him to be on the back foot, under pressure for this entire game. Okay, queen moves away. Grab a pawn with check, completely forcing. Okay, king moves away. Now, knight comes in to attack the queen. Notice that this knight has now improved its position. Okay, so it's also looking at these squares, and my queen could move to either of those squares as well. Okay, queen has to move. Queen check, defended by the knight, but it's not an attack square. Now, at this point, white decides to interpose a piece. So when you've got a piece that's attacked, there's lots of things that you can do. You can run away, you can capture the attacker, you can add a defender, which obviously doesn't apply if it's a check, or you can interpose another piece, or you can pin the attacker, etc., etc. Now, a couple of issues with this. One is obviously that bishop was defending this knight here, so that knight is now hanging. But also, the rook was under attack. So, king could have moved to either of those squares and defended the rook, but my opponent misses that. Interposes again. Check again. King moves, and now I grab the free material because it's free material. Okay, and now we have a half-hearted attack on the knight. Lots of options. A counter-attack is always one of the options, okay, when you're under attack. So I counter with check, which is completely forcing my opponent must respond. Interposes again, check there again, defended by the knight. King has to move. I've got a few options here. Actually, I think d4 would have been interesting as well. So now I attack the queen. So he's getting blows from every direction. And at this point, my opponent resigns the game. It's completely lost. And he's barely had any opportunity to think about what he wanted to do in the game because the force was too strong. Okay, so this is what I want you to think about, okay? When you're playing, don't just settle for, okay, it's a move. I mean, of course, at the start of the game, you develop your pieces. There's not much opportunity for forcing moves right at the start of the opening, but do think about it. These pins that constrain your opponent, but attacks, okay? But attack always has to have a purpose. Okay, now let's move on to game number 2. All right, so this is over in less than 20 moves as well. So I have the white pieces and I play e4. We have e5 and knight to c3, the Vienna game. And I'm hoping for knight f6. Yippee! Knight to f6. And now f4, the Vienna gambit. Will the pawn take? No. Black actually plays the best move at this point. Okay? And so this play is rated in the 1300s, mid-1300s. This is by far and away the best move that you should play in this position as black. Okay, so we have f takes e5, knight takes e4, okay, and now d4, okay. So I'm allowing black to capture my knight, and I can then recapture with the b pawn, giving me a decent pawn structure in the middle of the board and a lot of control over the board. Okay, okay. So he takes, pretty forcing move. He's attacking my queen. I recapture with the pawn. And now look at my pawns. I've got this posse in the middle of the board, and look again at black's development. Right? How many times has this knight moved? See? Once, twice, 3 times, and he's gone. Okay? Be very careful about this. Think about this when you're playing. You are investing turns every time you move a piece. Right? There's a reason why people say don't move pieces that you've already developed too much. So now, bishop comes out. So it's now become a tall pawn. Because it's not really working as a bishop. It's filling in the gap in the pawn chain. And knight to f3, developing, preparing to castle kingside. Nice thing in the Vienna, you have this semi-open f-file pointing down towards your opponent's king. And so castling kingside often is good because you get your rook straight on f1 on that semi-open file. Develops a knight. Again, this is not, it's not a great position for the knight. Because look, knight can't go here, can't go here, and can't go here. So arguably c6 might have been better. But you know, that dark square pawn chain is always going to cause him problems. And now bishop d3. So the bishop's looking down at this corner, and I'm preparing to castle kingside. Again, you know, you can really feel how tied up black is at this point. And now castles. So this is actually quite aggressive because I'm putting my rook straight on here. My opponent hasn't castled yet, but probably should think about it. My opponent now plays f6. Okay, so maybe he's kind of attacking the tip of my pawn chain there. That's defended by a pawn and a knight. So what should I do? Develop. Okay, queen comes to e2, adding a third defender. So now I have pawn, knight, and queen defending that pawn. Pawn takes. Okay, fairly forcing. What am I going to do? I mean, you can ignore a capture, or you can recapture. So here I'll recapture with a knight, thinking if he wants to capture with his knight, I've even got queen takes e5, threatening this undefended pawn. But he now moves his bishop a second time. Okay, and now I come in. Queen h5, check. Ultimate forcing move. You have to respond. Okay, now we have problems because pawn to g6 I can capture with the knight threatening the rook. Okay, pawn goes there, knight captures, pawn can't capture because queen captures the rook. Okay, so that would, this pawn here would actually, I mean this pawn is technically pinned. Okay, so if this pawn disappears, and obviously the only move this pawn can make right now is forwards, but if there takes, the pawn is pinned. But what can black do, right? I've got the control. I am forcing the situation. I'm ignoring this threat on here, and I've found a more aggressive, more forcing move. So yeah, I mean, what else can the king do? Can't go here, obviously. It can move there or there. And I've got ideas either way. So anyway, pawn comes in, knight takes pawn. Okay, forcing move. I've just captured a piece, and I'm attacking a piece of higher value. So what is black going to do? Clearly, he can't capture the knight. Interposes with the bishop. Okay, now find a forcing move. Rook e1 check. Okay, it's not. This isn't rocket science. This is just throwing punches at your opponent. Okay, okay. Rook e1 check. So what can he do? He can block with a queen. That's no good. He could block with a bishop. That's probably better. I mean, this bishop's actually playing no part at this point in time. The knight is technically pinned and it's under attack twice. He could put his knight there, but that gets captured by pawn. So what's he going to do? Dark square bishop comes back to e7. And now, bishop to a3. Okay, a second attacker on this bishop that has just pinned itself in front of the king, remember. Okay, so I'm not concerned about my knight right now. He can capture the knight if he wants, because I've got rook takes e7, check, forcing the king off, queen here, you know, and he's in a world of pain, and this is what we want in chess. Okay, so he takes the knight. I'm like, fair enough. But check this out, right? I've got two awesome moves, and I decide to play this. So I could capture here, okay? And then we might have like queen captures, but then if queen captures, he gets my queen. So that doesn't really work. But this is lovely. This is the better move. And this is something that I'm practicing at the moment, right? When you find a good move, try to find a better one, okay? And if it can, make it forcing, right? So black is just finished at this point in time, okay? We've got the same problem, and there's no light square bishop anymore, okay? Pawn takes, queen takes, checkmate. Pretty much, no, knight can block, but it's horrible. It's just horrible, okay? Mate is going to follow. So pawn can't take, so king is forced to move. And now, bishop takes e7. And check this out. A royal fork with the bishop, forking king and queen, beautiful. So what can black do here? Has to take with the queen, rook takes queen, and it's game over. It's you know, he never even got a look in. This guy is on his back, on the canvas, before the end of round one. Okay? And that, my friends, is the power of forcing moves. So what do you take away from this? It's simple, right? If you find a move, say, well, is there a more forcing move in this instance? Now, sometimes a check or an attack or whatever, it's just not forcing. Sometimes you can, for example, throw your bishop out with check and your opponent just quietly slides a pawn forward and attacks your bishop back. So you've allowed them to attack your bishop, and then you lose a turn, you lose a tempo by having to retreat your bishop. So, you know, not every check, not every attack is forcing, okay? The way to think about it is, will this move force my opponent to have to do something that he wasn't planning to do anyway, right? Force him to do something that he doesn't really want to do. That's the key, okay? So there you go, two very exciting games. Thank you for watching Chess Bootcamp. Please do subscribe if you aren't yet a subscriber, and I'll see you very soon.